Mr. Goldberg, thank you very much for your time. I want to start off with this question. Is there an obligation on companies to employ people with criminal records? If not, why do they do it?
Good morning to you and your viewers from a beautiful Port Elizabeth. I think it's become best practice now to do criminal checks on employees by getting their consent and then doing the criminal check. And there's nothing in South African labour law, specifically the law that regulates us, the Employment Equity Act, that prohibits you from doing so. So it's best practice to do so. And we'll get into the discussion just now about the relevance of the criminal record. But clearly you can do so, and you don't have to employ people who've got criminal records, as in this case.
It's interesting you use the words, it's become mandatory for companies to do these sort of background checks. The question, though, is do companies do these background checks, or do they simply rely on the person that is applying for a job?
It's become best practice in the industry that people do criminal checks, and there's nothing that prevents it. There's a misinterpretation as to whether the Employment Equity Act prevents you from doing so, and if you get that result, what you do about it. But there's nothing in law that doesn't allow you to do so. Best practice implies that you have to do it, and most big companies and organizations do it as a standard procedure.
Well, there is now this threat against the South African Post Office that the employee who's accused of murdering UCT student Uyinene Mrwetyana was an employee of theirs. And the question I would want to know from you is that if this does land up in court, what are the chances of success?
Well, again, I think it goes back to the employer's obligation to actually screen their employees and protect the public. I mean, the post office is a public enterprise giving service to the public. So I think there could be some liability coming to the post office for not doing this check if it wasn't done. Again, I see a lot of companies now, and maybe this is a good opportunity to start retrospectively looking at. So if you haven't done criminal checks, maybe do an audit within your company. And we do a lot of that in businesses in regard to audits around qualifications, because as you know, we also have a lot of people who have falsified their qualifications. And if you do a check and you have falsified your educational qualifications, then companies take action against it. So it would be the same thing. I think this is a good wake-up call for employers to say, well, have we done this? If we haven't done it, maybe we should do it. And the real question will be, what can you then do if I haven't disclosed the fact that I have a criminal record, like in this particular instance, a criminal record that's relevant to serving the public?
With identity theft being an issue as well, can a company tell a person they didn't get a job because of a criminal record?
There's absolutely no problem. And it's good that you asked that question, because the real question is, what is the relevance of the criminal record? Is it relevant to the job you do? Now, clearly, if I've committed a serious criminal offense that involves assault or anything like that against another citizen of South Africa, and I'm in a job that serves the public, that is relevant to the job that I'm doing.
Just as a final question to you, Mr. Goldberg, if the South African Post Office comes back and says, we did not know about this person's criminal record, will that defense stand up in court?
I think it's going to be difficult. I think if it's now best practice to do these criminal record checks and you just didn't do it at all, I think you could have some liability. And I think that's where the law and the interpretation of the law will evolve to. What is best practice? What would a reasonable employer have done? And reasonable employers do criminal reference checks on people today before they employ them, specifically where you could cause harm to the public.
Jonathan Goldberg, thank you very much for your time and waking up to talk to us here on The First Take. He's a labour lawyer based in Port Elizabeth.